Well, welcome everyone to session 9 and the final session of our first section called The Winning Life. And of course, this is a precursor to section 2, which is The Winning Leader. And what we're doing here is preparing you to coach others in the winning life, to become a coaching leader. But you can only lead people where you yourself have been. That's why we have to put an onus on ourselves for our own personal growth and development. We've got to back ourselves. The good news is that God backs you. God chose you before the creation of the world. God backed you when sin caused you and I to be cut off from Him, and Jesus came to redeem that which was lost. And what He came to redeem was not just simply you, but it was everything that you carry, which is your ability to impact and influence earth like it is in heaven. So, hey, God has backed you, and we're backing you because we're putting this together. We're inviting you to be part of this journey, but you've got to back yourself. And so, thankfully, many of you you're engaging in the process, but there'll be other opportunities for you to invest along the way. But the greatest leverage of our potential is when we reach out to help others. The more you coach others, inadvertently, you're coaching yourself. Because what happens is, as you're asking questions of somebody else and you're hearing what they reflect back to you and what you're saying in response to them, you actually catch them saying some fantastic things that you think, wow, yeah, I need to do that as well. But you also catch yourself saying some pretty good things. So this is the amazing thing about coaching. It is about unlocking what's inside of you. And so in this final part of section 1, The Winning Life, we're going to be looking at rhythm. Developing a rhythm that causes us to process everything as if it's the prize. I'll explain what I mean as I go along, but essentially, as human beings, we're prize-driven. If there's a prize, I'll go after the prize, that shiny new thing, that beautiful person, that spectacular place, that attractive career or opportunity. Whatever it is, we are naturally prize-driven. In other words, we're outside in, we see something, we go for it. And of course, that may kickstart us into a journey, but it doesn't sustain us for the journey. Because of course, when that thing that we are pursuing is still out of reach, we end up getting frustrated, we end up becoming discontent, and we actually miss out on the whole point of the journey. You see, the process is the prize. It's who you are becoming en route to the prize that you're pursuing. And of course, for us as Christians, while there is nothing wrong with shiny things and beautiful people and spectacular places and attractive careers and opportunities, nothing wrong with those things. But when we build our lives around them, we essentially make them our God. And that cannot satisfy us, because nothing physical can truly satisfy a spiritual or soul need. What does satisfy us, however, is the intimacy we engage with God in the process of becoming everything He's called us to be, as we pursue the prize of becoming like Christ, so that we get to show the world through our actions, through our behavior, through what we create, what heaven looks like on earth. And so this whole challenge today is about, what do I do when I'm experiencing the negative feeling of doubt and uncertainty? In other words, we've come a long way on this journey of dealing with many different emotions, such as indecision, being overwhelmed, feeling stuck. But there's that point in the journey when you think, right, do you know, I've kind of got everything lined up. I've come a long way, and I'm very appreciative of the journey, and I'm grateful at who I've become. But it just seems like I'm doing all the right things, but I don't know if I'm any closer to getting to where I need to get to. And it's in that moment of waiting that we can come up with all kinds of conclusions because we feel doubt, and doubt is a negative emotion, and then uncertainty such as, well, did I come the right direction? Have I taken the right turning? And the longer that goes on, the more doubt enters in. It's happened to you as it's happened to me on a journey. You know, you thought maybe you'd get somewhere in an hour and you followed the directions to the letter, but an hour and a half in, you're like, okay, I followed all the directions, but why am I not there yet? Then you start questioning yourself. Did I take the right turning back then? It shouldn't be taking this long. And those kinds of internal conversations become something that can take us from a winning to a losing conversation. So I want us to look at how do we navigate those feelings of doubt? How do we create a rhythm in our lives that regardless of where the results are at, whether we feel like we've achieved it or it's still far off, actually we're learning to embrace the process and to enjoy the process so much that it almost, and hear me right when I say this, it kind of, the prize almost just becomes the byproduct. It becomes, oh yeah, oh, and by the way, this is going to be the outcome. I've just fallen so much in love with the process that, you know, actually that's become my prize. You know, it's a bit like, I heard this analogy the other day. You know, you can be deposited, you know, £1 million or dollars into your account because you've won a prize or you've won the lottery, and you've got that money, you've got that in your account. But out of the person who gets the money because they have won it versus the person who has earned £1 million that's just been deposited, who's going to be the most satisfied? Well, of course, it's going to be the person who's earned the million, not the person who's just been given the million. Because actually, the prize of the million is in the earning of the million. It's the process of creating and making something that creates the result. That actually, that's what we're wired for. We're wired for the journey, not the destination. Interesting enough, and again, this isn't in my notes, so I hope I get to squeeze everything in. But, you know, if really heaven was the destination, and this is very often what we believe as Christians, then Jesus would have saved us and then immediately killed us. Because, think about it, the moment I made a decision to follow Jesus, my eternal destination is all wrapped up, it's secure. Well, why didn't he kill me then? Why? Because there's a journey. He saved me for the journey, not for the destination. The destination is the outworking of the journey. Well, we're going to embrace this a little bit more as we go along. But key number one, okay, I'm going to give you 10 keys as usual, and I'm going to go through it and give you opportunity to share which of these 10 is the one that provokes you and challenges you the most. But number one, God is working while we are waiting. God is working while we are waiting. Have you ever been too eager to move on? I know that you have. Let me give you some illustrations. Have you ever been on your computer clicking, double-clicking again, because it didn't appear that anything moved, and then you double-clicked, and actually by double-clicking you've ended up creating a bigger problem, and then you're like, okay, let me try that again, and you do it again, and what's happening is your eagerness is slowing you down. Yeah, you're rushing, and your haste is actually causing a hindrance. Another example might be you're in a supermarket, yeah, and you're looking at the different tills, and you're thinking, okay, till number 6 has just opened up. And you're thinking, okay, it's got 2 people in, I've got 4 people in. If I make it before Doris, who looks pretty mean, but she's slow, then I'm going to get there. Yeah? And so you're weighing up your options, and you move, and just as you move, they say, till number 6 is now closing. And you're like, oh, and then you turn round and suddenly Big Clive has rocked up and he's taken your space, and you're like, oh no, can't mess with Clive, can't even begin to challenge him and say, that was my space, Clive, but I thought this was quicker. And all of a sudden you realise, oh my word, my rushing around has slowed me down. Waiting is where the development happens. Waiting is where trust is developed. Mark chapter 8 verse 36. we read, what good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit their soul? Jesus gives us those incredible words that I think in our heads we're like, yeah, of course, but in our hearts we kind of disagree with it, because actually, I'm not sure if I was given the whole world, I think I'd be pretty happy. But what Jesus is saying here, again, it's echoing what I've already said, is actually, it's not what you give. Sorry, I don't know where that word came. Give? It's not what you are given. It is what you create. It is what you earn in the process. It's the process that is the prize. Okay? Because what Jesus is saying here and what we can read into this, because again, when we read soul, sometimes we think that's just talking about eternal salvation. And of course, you can't buy eternal salvation, but the soul is also about where we are satisfied. It's the part of us that experiences satisfaction. So Jesus is saying somebody can deposit the whole world in your account, but actually you're forfeiting the soul process of the satisfaction of creating, of dominating the earth that he's called us to be part of. I hope you're understanding what I'm saying here. But the waiting is what, or the lack of waiting is what got us into all the mess in the first place. Of course, Adam and Eve were told, you're made in the image of God. Fantastic. We've got a principle. We've got a truth. And yet Satan says, if you eat of this fruit, then you'll be like God. In other words, they didn't want to wait for the process of journeying through intimacy, of waiting. They wanted the immediate result. And of course, the rushing, jumping lanes to try and be like God, double-clicking on the clickbait that Satan had offered to them, got them into a whole load of issues. Double-clicking on clickbait usually unlocks a virus, and in this case, it did. It was called sin. Lamentations 3:25, the Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul who seeks him. You see, your soul is either trying to be satisfied by the external or it's trying to be satisfied by the eternal. In any moment, we can slip into externally trying to satisfy our souls. But in that moment, we need to self-correct and say, Holy Spirit, right now, I need to be satisfied by you and not what is around me. And that helps the waiting. In the waiting, God is working. And God makes us wait long enough, to detox us from being prize-led to process-driven. Yes, you heard it. You are complaining like I have complained to God. Why is it taking so long? Why can't we hurry up the process? And God is like, well, I love you too much. I need to detox you. Because even though you're saying you're process-driven, your soul and your heart is still saying you're prize-driven. And he won't lead us into a promise that we can't sustain any more than the children of Israel needed the wilderness experience to detox them from the prize to actually being ready to be living in the promise of Canaan, to sustain life at that new level. Number 2, active waiting positions us for growth. Active waiting positions us for growth. What do you mean by active waiting? Well, Psalm 27 verse 14 says, wait for the Lord. Wait for the Lord. That just as soon as I read that, I hear Leanne's voice. Because I always hear Leanne saying, Gareth, will you slow down and wait for me? Yeah, wait for me. So wait for Leanne and wait for the Lord. And that usually is evidence, evidence that I'm taller than Leanne, she's smaller, and that naturally I'm going to be ahead, but also that I do rush. But wait for the Lord, be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Really interesting there, isn't it? It's like, wait for the Lord because your heart needs to catch up. Your heart needs to catch up. The problem is our head and our body are out of step. Like me and Leanne, let's call Leanne the heart and the soul because she's the good part of this partnership. And I am the sinful mind and body. And so when Leanne says, wait, I'm giving her lots of evidence right now and ammunition to use against me in the future. But when she's saying, wait for me, she's saying, wait, because actually, when you start becoming separated from your heart and your soul, okay, you become unstable. You start to have two parts of you that are working against each other, where you get internal conflict. It's when you start to violate your own values, okay, and you wonder why you're unhappy. It's because you're not waiting for your heart and your soul. So okay, Gareth, give me some practical tips on how we can do this. Well, coming up on your screen right now are 4 boxes. And there are 4 boxes that I've kind of put together that you can use to as a self-evaluation tool to ask yourself some questions, okay? So first of all, what do I need to be waiting for? Okay, what right now am I hurrying towards, but actually I need to realize this is a wait, not a hurry. Okay, so what do I need to be waiting for? But of course, active waiting is not just about doing nothing, it's about still being active. So while I'm waiting, the second box is, the top right hand of your screen, is watching. So I can be watching while I am waiting. In other words, what do I need to be learning at this moment? Who do I need to be watching? Because again, we're all in a discipleship process. So who's discipling me? Who's coaching me? Who do I need to be watching? Because I may think I'm ready, but maybe I'm not ready. What do I need to be watching? Maybe content. It may be Winning University. Maybe I need to watch it more than once when we come together. Because yes, I'm hearing it, but I'm not necessarily digesting it. So active waiting is watching. The third box, bottom left, is worshiping. While you're waiting, be worshiping. In other words, make sure your soul and your heart are fixed on Christ and not on the prize, because maybe that's part of the problem. Intimacy is key on the journey. And then the final box at the bottom right-hand side, what do I need to be working on? Again, maybe there's some things I need to double down on, and I can be working on things. Maybe it's not the things that I'd love to be doing right now, but it's going to help prepare me. And I think that active waiting will really help you to release the result rather than hunt down the result, and help you embrace the process along the way. Number 3, today's barrier is tomorrow's milestone. Part of the challenge of the process is when we hit the barriers. And of course, when we hit barriers, that's when doubt creeps in. You know, am I hitting this barrier because really this barrier is telling me that I am limited to this point and I can't go past, and we start drawing all kinds of conclusions. But let me encourage you, because part of the winning life, part of the kingdom life, is the fact that you are designed to break through barriers. You're designed to have a healthy relationship with barriers. In other words, they aren't something that you should be fearful of or that you should allow to become a mirror to you, that, hey, this is where you go and no further. But they should give you insight into the fact that you carry the potential to break through that barrier. Psalm 18, 28, 30, you, Lord, keep my lamp burning. My God turns my darkness into light. With your help, I can advance against a troop. Or another way of saying that last line in the concordance is, or run through a barricade. Wow, imagine a barricade, a whole load of troops, and you just running through. And with my God, I can scale a wall. As for God, his way is perfect. The Lord's word is flawless. He shields all who take refuge in him. God's way is perfect, but it is also a way full of problems. And the reason why it's full of problems is because problems are what bring the potential of heaven that's in you out of you. So the world gets to see heaven. Can you see why problems are part of his perfect path? Let's be honest, we think God's perfect path is a path which has no problems. But unfortunately, that is not God's path. God's path has problems, and we have to learn to engage with them, but realizing it's engaging with God totally in the picture. Just like David, when he rocked up and his brothers and the whole nation of Israel were looking at Goliath, they were seeing Goliath and all they could see was a barrier and a limiting character that wouldn't allow them to progress. David rocks up and of course he comes and he sees Goliath, but he sees his God behind Goliath. And he sees from a true faith perspective, hey, this is a barrier we can break through. All the great inventors, people of influence over the years, have all learnt to engage with problems and barriers along the way. Bill Gates, his first business failed. Albert Einstein didn't even speak till he was 4 years of age. Jim Carrey, well-known actor and comedian, he used to be homeless. Benjamin Franklin, one of the American forefathers, he dropped out of school aged 10. Richard Branson, he's got dyslexia and yet he's created billions with ultimate companies in every industry. Oprah Winfrey, she had a baby aged 14 which then died, and yet she managed to push past what could only be described as a horrific emotional experience for somebody of that age. Thomas Edison, there's all kinds of theories as to how many times he tried, but it's certainly 1,000+ attempts to create the light bulb. And when asked, how he managed to get past his failures, he said, I hadn't failed. I just simply found 10,000 ways that don't work. That is a process-driven people group, okay? And as kingdom people, we have got to be process-driven. Hey, I found a barricade. Woohoo! It's time to break through. It's time to unleash another part of heaven's potential that I carry on earth's challenge. Okay, let me move on to the next one. Restraint, number 4, can release revelation. Restraint can release revelation. I was talking to somebody this week and they were just explaining to me just a current situation that they're in, and really how the feeling I was getting was that they felt that sense of being trapped by what was the situation they were currently in. And yet they were actively thinking of, okay, I'm not going to focus on what I can't control, I'm going to focus on what I can control and to find creative solutions. And I encouraged them in that moment because just literally something came into my spirit, and it was the proverb 29 verse 18, which says, where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint, but blessed is the one who heeds wisdom's instruction. And as I was speaking to them, I literally had in my spirit, that works backwards. So I was thinking, what do you mean that works backwards? And so literally as I said it to them, I said, when you think about it this way, Proverbs 29:18, where there is no revelation, people cast off restraint. Where there is no vision, people perish. Actually, reverse it. Where there is restraint, therefore vision and revelation can flow. So it works both ways. You need vision and you need restraint. Vision without restraint simply becomes fantasy that never gets actioned upon. But also, if we don't have sometimes the restraints that we have, and right now some of us have got restraints, maybe financially, relationally, maybe health-wise, we've got restraints. Whatever restraints are there, rather than saying, God, get these restraints off me, and of course, we can ask, but maybe they're not being removed because those restraints are actually going to create a release of revelation that if those restraints weren't there, we wouldn't come up with that particular solution. And maybe that solution is what's going to get us to the next level and the next space that God wants us to move into. So restraint releases revelation. Number 5, work your wins. Work your wins. You see, let me be honest with you, this is probably one that is most provocative for me. So my wins usually are so spaced far apart. So my wins will usually be linked to like my vision goals of, okay, 30 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 1 year from now. And so like the wins in those moments, they're like, oh yeah, they're the wins that I want. The problem is the greater the distance between the wins, the more we are prone to losing heart and becoming uncertain. Because what happens is a win ignites our passion for the process and ignites motivation and creativity. So think about it this way. The more wins we can create, the more we can unleash passion, motivation, and creativity. So what do I mean by work your wins? Well, again, this is something that we can learn in the waiting. Define the win. Define the win. Right now, in this moment, what is the win? What do you mean, Gareth? What's the win for tomorrow? No. What's the win for tomorrow or next week? What's the win for now? Define the win. Okay? W-I-N. What's important now? And define the win and go for the win. Get that win. And then move on to the next win. And the next win. And the next win. And what happens is you start falling in love with the process of winning, and the results take care of themselves. Ephesians 6, I haven't got time to read all of this, but the Apostle Paul talks about the warfare that we're involved in. And the challenge with warfare, even if you think about the Second World War, is it about 4 years the Second World War lasted? You know, a war is full of battles. And so you can either focus on the war 4 years apart, or you can focus on the battles, of which there would have been hundreds, if not thousands of battles, because there are individual battles, there are battles within battlefields, of pockets of battles going on. If you break it down to more battles and more wins, you unleash the momentum of heaven. Slaves, obey your earthly masters, the Apostle Paul says, with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Obey them not only to win their favor when their eye is on you, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from your heart. Serve wholeheartedly as if you were serving the Lord, not people, because you know that the Lord will reward each one of you for whatever good they do, whether they are slave or free. Notice the Apostle Paul is speaking to somebody who is entrapped by slavery. Okay, now slavery in different contexts meant different things. Sometimes a slave within a certain context that Paul was talking about wasn't, sat in a dungeon somewhere. They were part of a family, but they weren't officially in the family. So there were kind of levels of slavery, again, that he was talking about. But essentially, they were there by definition of their circumstance. And so rather than focus on the helplessness of slavery, the Apostle Paul is saying, focus on serving from your heart. Focus on what you can control. Create the win of serving to the best of your ability, even if right now you'd rather be in another country and free from your current scenario. Verse 13, put on the full armor of God so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. In other words, it's the posture of winning and learning what that looks like. It's an attitude. It's a mood. I'm going to win in this moment. And then when you do that, God does what only He can do. And that's what Paul is saying here. There's a whole lot of fighting that God will do for you. But you've got to take responsibility. And I've got to take responsibility to work my wins. To work my wins. Okay. Let me jump into a quote just before I go on to the next point, because this is, again, any opportunity to bring Lord of the Rings in. There's a moment when Frodo's talking to Gandalf, and this is what he said. He said, I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. In other words, the fact that he'd had to get this ring and destroy this ring. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. Are you focusing right now on what is out of your control? Are you focusing what is beyond something that you can directly influence? Well, right now, decide to work your wins. Work on what you can work on now, okay? Number 6, define your rhythms. Define your rhythms. We're all different. We're all different personalities, different characters. We love different things. But if we're going to enjoy the process and not just endure it, then, and if it's going to take us longer, as it usually does, to get to where we want to get to, then we've got to start to define rhythms that are enjoyable, that are going to unlock the best that we have to contribute. So I want you to look back and evaluate, what does a bad day look like for me? Now, I'm not talking about the fact that the broadband was switched off in your house. Don't talk to me about broadband right now. I'm not talking about the fact that somebody was really nasty to you at work or on that Zoom call that you had. Those things happened to you. I'm talking about the bad day that happened. And actually, when you look at it, it's because maybe you approached things wrong, or I got things in the wrong order, or I went in with the wrong attitude and a wrong mood. It's so important to evaluate what bad looks like and look for the clues of how I contributed towards that bad day. The same goes for a good day. What made a really good day? You know, that day when the day just flew and literally I had to remind myself to eat, because usually when I have to remind myself to eat, it means I'm in a flow. And when I'm in the flow, that usually means that I'm congruent with my values and what I'm passionate about, and energy just flows. And start to ask yourself the question, well, what did I do on the good day that I didn't do on the bad day? And usually there are 4 different things that we need to remain active in, okay? And if you start to define, okay, these are the 4, 5, 6 things that I need to do every day to make sure that I'm developing a good rhythm, then make sure you do them, okay? Usually there's a form of spiritual exercise, a soul exercise, a mental exercise, and a physical exercise. What do you mean by spiritual exercise? Well, again, in terms of that whole word of being active, staying active. Active communion with God is spiritual exercise. Active communion is not just passive, letting something pass through your ears on a podcast or on audio or on a YouTube clip, but am I actively having communion with God? Jesus demonstrated rhythm in his ministry. 3.5 years while in ministry, he had rhythms. You know, he could have been somebody who could have had the fear of not getting the job done. You know, 3.5 years, I'm going to be crucified, and yet I've got to equip 12 uneducated, unschooled guys to transform the earth. I mean, that's a pretty, big goal, and that's one that you could hurry towards. But even Jesus set rhythms. John 15, 5-8, Jesus said, I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. Jesus learnt to abide in the Father, and he invites us to abide in him. In other words, abiding is active communion, an active engagement of intimacy with the Father, active through his word, active in his presence, active through spiritual disciplines. We need to make sure spiritual exercise is rooted in every single day. The soul exercise, active compassion. In other words, it's not feed my soul moments in the day. It's okay, soul, feed the world. Okay, so in other words, who can I show compassion on? Of course, it starts at home. Compassion on my loved ones, compassion on my family, compassion on colleagues, compassion on people that I meet. You know, even just moments of preferring other people and being generous to other people. Active compassion unlocks motivation in us. And of course, it makes sure that we are givers rather than takers. The third thing, mental exercise, active comprehension. You've got to be learning every day. You're built to learn, okay? Don't just get on the hamster wheel of doing. Have learning moments, active comprehension. Are there new ways I can learn of doing the same things that I have to do every single day? And the fourth thing, active conditioning. Physically, what am I doing to condition my body, not just to get through today, but so that I can be alive and healthy in 5, 10 years' time? And then I haven't got time, but design daily rhythms. So that's like a daily rhythm. Design a weekly rhythm. Design a monthly rhythm. We could spend a lot of time on this, but I'm throwing the idea out there. Miracles of the moment for Jesus weren't miracles that were lasting. It was the process of salvation that Jesus left us with that ultimately was the miracle of the process. And sometimes we want miracle moments when actually he said, do you know what? I've given you a miracle process that's going to unlock the new identity in you. And you need to bring that new you into every day, every week, every month. Okay, let's move to the next point. Number 7, change happens in us before it comes through us. We've got to trust in the process that there's a reason why we haven't yet entered into the promise. And we've got to believe it's because actually there's more in us that has to change in order for the change that we want to bring to the world to come through us. Jesus reminds us in Matthew 9 of the old wineskin and the new wine. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst. The wine will run out and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved. What I love about Bible verses is sometimes when you work them backwards, you again catch the heart of what was being communicated. The whole idea here, Jesus is saying, is preservation. How do you preserve what is precious? To preserve the new wine, you need the new wine skin. Okay? Again, he wasn't saying new is better than old in this particular illustration. He's just saying that if you're going to pour new wine into something, then you want to make sure that what is precious resource can last. And the way that you preserve it is by making sure that what holds it can truly hold it over time. And sometimes, we can feel like we're ready in the moment. And maybe we are ready in the moment, but God can see out of time. Am I ready for the many moments that lie ahead? And maybe it's taking longer than you thought, because God wants to make sure that you can preserve what he has already entrusted to you. You've just got to wait for it. So take heart. Change is going to happen through you, but it's first got to happen in you. Okay? And there's something active we can do, again, in the waiting. And I've purposely given us plenty of practical things to do from this session, especially as it's our last session. But resource is never the problem, but capacity is. Resource is never the problem. In other words, the reason you're not entering into, or you haven't been given yet by God, is not because God is running short. It's not because people in the kingdom are panic buying and therefore he's run out and there's a supply shipment on its way. No, resource is never the problem with God. It's whether you or I have the capacity, like the wineskin, to hold over time what he's entrusted to us. So what you can be doing and what I can be doing is ruthlessly prioritizing what we're engaging with on a day-by-day basis. That's what I look at, and I think, okay, this is part of how I prepare for what God is going to bring to me. Because sometimes, usually people, want more, but already they're not already handling the time or the money that they've already been given. And I developed something back in the early 2000s, and actually, only kind of pulled it back out a few years ago when I was putting together my latest book. And I thought, hey, that was pretty good. And it was a means of just evaluating your current activities and letting them filter through what I call the core role circle. And so you see it on your screen right now. But this is about, prioritizing what you're currently doing, because sometimes we're not cutting things off from what we're doing, and therefore we're saying, hey, God, bring more, but I'm already at 100%. And God's saying, well, you need to prune, you need to cut back, you need to prioritize. And on your screen right now, you can see that working from the inside out, as always, is the way to go. In other words, number one, core role. What are the things that I need to be focusing on that is my sweet spot, that's going to cause me to grow and help others to grow? Okay? Number two, what are the things that I enjoy doing, tasks I enjoy, but deep down I know that that's not my core thing? Okay? Then number three, these are things I'm able to do and I have competency. In fact, people have said I'm good at it. And I carry these out, but they don't fuel my passion. Number 4, I've been asked to do something. This is about tasks maybe that have recently come or been requested of me. And it's a responsibility I've been given. But maybe that's not my competency, or it's not the thing that I'm passionate about, and it certainly isn't my core role. And then there's number 5, the things that maybe I'd be open to doing, new opportunities that are on the horizon. But you're not quite sure yet whether it fits into your core role or not. Again, what I encourage people to do is to list all the things that you're currently doing and to put by it number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 based upon whether that activity fits into that core role or the thing that you enjoy doing but isn't really your core thing, or maybe it's a competency that you're able to do and it doesn't fuel your passion. Listen, here's the idea. The idea is, where possible, to delegate and to empower to others the things that you've been given responsibility for, but isn't your passion to do. Rather than saying, oh, why do I have to do this? Why don't you raise up somebody, because your number 4 might be somebody else's number 1. And wow, if I could get somebody else to do this, and actually it's their number 1, then I'm actually going to be bringing somebody on. It may also help you when people ask you to do new things or get involved in new things to actually think more, okay, is this a core role activity for me? And if not, don't do it. Or if not, say, hey, do you know, I like the idea of that, but I'm not sure that that is my thing. Or I'll do it for a certain period of time, and then I'll give you some feedback as to whether I am the person for this. Again, it's just a means of evaluating what you're currently doing, and maybe every 6 months to say, I want to cut something off from what I'm currently doing because it isn't a core role activity. Because if you can create capacity, then in the margins, that's where opportunity arrives. The problem is, if there's no margin, God can't pour more in. Any more than when the widow had the jars of oil and she had them all filled, the oil stopped flowing. The oil of opportunity stops flowing when there are no more jars to keep filling. Number 9, strip back and simplify. Strip back and simplify. Ecclesiastes 10:10. If the axe is dull and its edge unsharpened, more strength is needed, but skill will bring success. Take time to simplify. How do you do this? From a place of rest. Evaluation. Planning into your week evaluation, when you can say, okay, I need to strip things back and simplify things and use the time to sharpen the saw rather than just going into the next week with the same level of sharpness from the week before, knowing that over time you're getting blunter and blunter and blunter, and you're going to have to put more energy into this week than you did last week, but only get the same results. And then the final one, work in principles and systems. Psalm 1, verse 2-3. This reminds me, this psalm, of that person at school. You know, there's always a person at school, if you remember back to your school days, remember that person who was like always good at everything? Like they usually made it to head boy or head girl. I never made such heights. But you know, they're super pupils. Yeah, they came from another planet. Yeah, they were the captain of the sports teams. They were the lead musician in the music group. They were straight A student. And you're like, my word, where did they get this kid from? They must have been bred in a lab, you know, and you're just like, wow, everything they seem to do seemed to work. Well, when I read Psalm 1, 2-3, it's like this. It says, but he whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates, blessed, sorry, I missed some words. Blessed is the one whose delight is in the law of the Lord and who meditates on his law day and night. That person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers. Again, read the passage backwards. Wouldn't you like to be a whatever they do prosper? Yeah, I'd like to be one of those super pupils. Well, what does the super pupil do in the kingdom of God? Well, they're a person who works in principles and systems. What do you mean, Gareth? Quickly, because I haven't got time. But principle, delight in the law. Laws predict success in the kingdom. The Bible is full of laws, and God says, if you stick to my commands, you will be blessed in what you do. And then so find the principle to unlock the success in the area of life, whether it's finance, relationships, work, whatever it is, there's a principle and that God has given that will unlock the success. But then you need the system. In this picture, you've got the roots that reflect the principles, that dig down deep into the words, the laws, the principles. But then you've got the river is a key part of this analogy, because the river creates the ability for the tree to continue to grow regardless of the season. The river is the flow. It's the system. What do you mean, Gareth, by a system? In other words, we need to, along with the principle, set ourselves up, position ourselves to succeed. What does a system look like? Systems are habits. What habit do you need to design and to create to make sure that you're aligning to the principle? Give you a quick clue. So if you know the principle is, if I put my heart under positive pressure regularly, I'll be healthy and fit, okay? What's the system? Before I go to bed every night, I'm going to put my my kit, where did that word come from? Kit, my sports kit, ready, okay, for the following morning, so that literally I'm out of bed, I put it on and I'm straight out the door without even thinking. In other words, the system helps you when you don't feel like doing it, just to simply slip into the system based on the principle and follow through on the activity. And when you create a system, it might be, okay, the system is I'm not going to have any biscuits in the house. And that system is going to keep me to the principle of eating the right meals at the right times that keeps my weight under control. Or it might be, I'm going to make sure that there's a room ready with a journal and a Bible every night before I go to sleep, so that when I wake up, I know the room is ready. You create a system, okay? The water is flowing by the tree, and when you create those two, you'll find that whatever the season, you will create a rhythm and a process to succeed. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Lots for you to discuss. Pick the one that provokes you the most, and come on, let's create goals that create application that will unleash the result in your life.